Hello, friends. It's your boy Jeff again. We made it to the end of another week. Thank God. Things have been picking up slowly around here. My wife Corrine is slowly starting to get better, but it's going to be a long process. But nevertheless, there were some glimmers of hope, which gives me the confidence to keep some confidence. But the doctors all said it's going to take weeks and weeks, if not months, for her to get back to normal. So, we're just doing it day by day, and I still have a good week and a half, a little less than a week and a half of vacation left. So I'm hanging in there. Um, I've got a stack of records here. You can see. So I'm not going to. I'm going to try not to dawdle about with a lot of talk, but I'm going to kind of work backwards from as when I got these records. So these first three I got the other day because not only am I going through all this stuff with my wife and her surgery and all that, but at the same time, the union at my work was negotiating the contract with management because it's up for renewal. So that went on for a couple of weeks, and the so-called last best final offer that they made, which was a bunch of shit, to speak bluntly and honestly, was rejected when we voted, which was last Sunday. So the kids were home, so I was able to duck out and go into work and vote on the contract, and I voted no. So they went back to the negotiating table, and a couple days later, we got a modified last best final offer, which, long story short, was much better than the original one that they put out. So, say what you will about unions, whether you're for them or against them. Obviously, I'm in one, I'm for them. And just in my own personal experience, I've seen them do enough good to really think that they're a worthwhile thing. And I'm sad that not more of our workforce is not unionized, because we need that in this world. But I'm not getting into any kind of side discussion about that. Anyway, went back a second time and voted, and I voted yes for it this time. It passed. I was the vote counter. And on the way home, I decided to celebrate by stopping at the thrift store because I haven't been there in probably almost 2 months. So I knew there would be some kind of turnover of stock of records, and I was right. I found three. First one being Quiet Fire by Roberta Flack. This is her album from 1971. Atlantic label, and it's got the I love it when albums have the inner sleeve with a catalog of other albums. As you can see, I love these kind of inner sleeves because it really puts the record in context with what else was out at the time. So I love Roberta Flack. I mean, who doesn't? She's got a fantastic voice. And this is almost a mint copy, cover and record, so I couldn't say no, and it was $3, so I bought it. I need some of my Jazzbo guys to tell me about this one. Blackbird by Donald Byrd. This came out in 1973, according to Discogs. I just cleaned and logged these records this morning. And this copy I found pretty early on in the listing. So I'm assuming it's an early pressing. It's a Blue Note. Very nice condition. I've seen Donald Byrd records, I think, on the VC before, but I need you jazz guys to tell me about this one. I haven't had time to really look it up, but when I saw it, I recognized his name, and when I pulled the record out, saw it was a Blue Note, that was automatic. It was coming with me. There's no way in hell I was going to leave a Blue Note record in the thrift store. I think that's against the law, isn't it? If it's not, it ought to be. But pretty happy with this one, even though I don't know much about it. I'm just glad to get any kind of Blue Note records that I can get. And this one is an oddball. And when I saw it, something inside me just said to take it with, to buy it. And that is this one here. It's a Christmas album. Christmas was Colonel Sanders. This came out in 1969. Here is the back. And of course, I still have to take the price sticker off of it. It's a unipack cover, meaning it's got a floppy on one side and then the record slides in here. And you've got a Christmas message from the Colonel. Nothing too weird and exotic in terms of Christmas music. It just seems like it's mostly country and classical. But for whatever reason, I looked at it, and the record itself is in mint condition. It's on RCA Records. This came out in 1969. I found the date on here. Yep. See the date. So I figured a 50-year-old Christmas record with the Colonel. Come on. How bad can it be? So I bought it. I found it on Discogs. I only found one listing for the album. Doesn't completely match the codes on this, but it's close enough. So, and it's not worth anything. It's just a couple bucks, but still. Can't say no to the Colonel, can you? I know I couldn't. So those were the treasures I got at the thrift store in celebration of signing a new union contract. So I'll be good for the next 4 years, God willing. Then we're working our way backwards here now. A week ago today, I had heard about an estate sale in my old neighborhood of Burbank, Illinois, which is right next to Oak Lawn. And it was right around the corner from my folks' house. In fact, my dad was the one who called me and told me about it and said, hey, you got to get over to this guy's house. He was an old neighbor of ours who I remembered from way back in the day, like in the 80s when I used to live there in Burbank. I guess the husband who I remember, he died, and the wife is in a home. She's like 101 years old. So the kids were running an estate sale, trying to empty the house out. And it's a pretty big house, I have to say. And this was the one that had all the Star Trek stuff, if you recall a couple videos back, where I said that. Star Trek posters, books, comics, magazines, action figures still in the package. Almost anything you could think of Star Trek they had. They even had a Amigo Spock. And if you guys are action figure collectors, you know that the Amigo Corporation put out a lot of cool stuff in the 70s. You know, a lot of Marvel and DC characters and Star Trek 2 and Planet of the Apes. But this Spock was pretty beat up and he didn't have any of his, he didn't have the communicator or the phaser or anything. So, and they wanted like a ridiculous amount of money for it. So I'm like, no. But they also had a ton of records there. They had tons of Frank Sinatra. In fact, they had a couple different copies of Songs for Swingin' Lovers, which was an album that I picked up earlier this year. But my copy is pretty beat, and it's not even really playable. It's so bad, but I kept it anyway. And the copies that I found there were in about the same condition. But, I'm not a huge Sinatra fan. I didn't really recognize all the albums. I don't really know too much about his music, but there were a couple of cases of Sinatra albums. There was a pretty fair stack of Nat King Cole. I don't really know anything about Nat King Cole. And a lot of these were in kind of questionable shape. In fact, a lot of what was there was big band, classical, 60s, easy listening stuff. A lot of course, Mantovani. But there were some soundtracks there that I found. This one, Shaft. Shut your mouth. I'm just talking about Shaft. Mint condition copy. Early pressing too, according to Discogs. So I was stoked to find this in among all of the dross of, you know, Manavani, Mitch Miller, who else? And out pops Shaft. Brand new looking double album on the Enterprise label. Fantastic stuff. And of course, right around the time when I was pulling this album out and looking at it, you know, I was in the basement, and that's where a lot of the records were. And the steps down to the basement were pretty narrow and pretty steep, you know, and I even had to kind of bend backwards and duck under all of the ductwork that was overhead because it was a low ceiling. So I'm sitting there, well, not sitting there, I'm standing there, I should say, and I'm flipping through these boxes of records, and in the corner of my eye, I see somebody coming down the stairs, and then it time passed it kind of like in slow motion. I turn my head, and I see this person like pitch forward, like because he missed the last step on the stairs coming down to the basement floor. We missed it, and he pitched forward, and it was like a blur flying past me, and I, in a half a second later, I recognize, oh shit, that's my dad, and he falls on the floor, rolls over, almost cracks his head on a bench, and there was a TV that was off to the side that was kind of sitting on this sort of unstable pile of stuff, and it was wobbling back and forth. And I look at him, I'm like, shit, that's my dad. And then I look at this TV, so I go and I stop the TV from falling on him and cracking his head open again. So I have all these memories attached to this album now. Every time I'm going to play this. And yeah, he was fine. He had a little cut on his cheek, but other than that, he was fine. He wasn't hurt. Of course, there were a bunch of people around him, you know, besides me. Oh, you okay? You okay? Because, you know, my dad's 76. You know, these old guys can't afford to be taking spills like that. But aside from the title track, which is one of my all-time favorite songs anyway, I'm not as familiar with what's on this album, but I'm still glad to have it. So, the soundtrack for Shaft. And by the way, if you substitute Jeff instead of Shaft while you're during that song, it fits perfectly. Who's the cat that won't pop out when there's danger all about? Jeff. Right on. See? There were two other soundtracks that I found at this estate sale. That was pretty much the extent of my finds there. This was a movie called The Idolmaker. This came out in the early 80s. I want to say like 1980, 81. And back in the day when we first had cable TV, you know, we had HBO, they would show whatever movies they had. And for some reason, this movie was in heavy rotation. It seemed like every time I turned around, this movie was on. But a lot of the songs I actually remember enjoying. And I'd never seen this soundtrack anywhere before. So when I came across it, I just grabbed it. It was only $2. So it's kind of like a movies about like this guy, you know, played by Ray Sharkey here, who went on to be on that show Wise Guy in the 80s, if you remember. He was kind of like a manager for these teen idol type of guys, and the movie's about, you know, how he got them famous, and then they ended up dumping them as they became bigger stars. But a lot of the songs in here I recognized, and I remembered liking them, so I figured, what the heck, for $2, how can you go wrong? And then the last one, and probably the most interesting of the three, is the soundtrack to Valley of the Dolls. And it came with this signature in it, to Terry, love Tony Scotti. Terry was the wife who I mentioned earlier, who was 101. Very sweet lady. And I'm guessing that this autograph is legit. You know, it's got 1968 written on it. This is actually still in the shrink wrap, and this is slipped in under the shrink wrap, so I didn't remove the shrink wrap. You can kind of see it there in the light. Not that I'm a huge Valley of the Dolls fan, but here's the you can see Tony Scotti was in the movie. So I'm guessing it's legit. It's basically the reason why I bought it. I mean, the record's in mint condition too. I'll probably spin it at some point, just for shits and giggles. But I figured, what the heck, for $2, it's kind of an interesting thing. And it's on the 20th Century Fox Records label, mint condition too. So these records were well cared for. I don't even know if they were played very much, but that's what I picked up at the estate sale. And then before that, before my wife had her surgery, her two sisters came to visit, which is a very long story, needless to say. But one of the sisters, of course, knows I'm a record collector, a vinyl guy, and she gifted me with a copy of Led Zeppelin 2. So how cool is that? Believe it or not, I didn't have this on vinyl at the time. This was one of the few that I didn't have, and you can see here it's a record club label, manufactured under license by Atlantic Records to the Record Club of America. You see that sticker there? So, but the record itself looks like it's in very nice condition. Very nice gatefold sleeve. And pretty awesome. I thought I was surprised as all get out when she pulled this out and gave it to me. I'm like, what? You gave me the Brown Bomber. Oh my God, I need this record. So that worked out pretty good. Now, the rest of these albums I'm going to kind of blow through pretty quick because these all came from that seller that I went to probably a month or two ago now. And I picked up a bunch of records from him for cheap. And he called my dad up at one point because he was another old neighbor. And he told him to just come over and take all these records for nothing. He just gave them to him. So I have a big stack here that I decided to keep. I have another fairly large stack that will probably be used for VCLT down the road. Of course, I haven't cleaned all those records yet, but they look like they're in decent enough shape to be giftable. So that's probably what I'm going to try to do in the future, or maybe even for Christmas time. We'll see. But for now, I'm just going to blow through these. This was Stephen Stills' album. It's just called Stills. As you can see here, this is from the 70s. Kenny Loggins, Keep the Fire. The only reason I have this is because it's got This Is It on it. And that's one of my favorite songs of his, if not my only favorite song of his. So that's the reason why I kept this one. Jesse Colin Young, Songbird. Again, I don't know much about this guy, but the record's nearly mint condition. I figured, how bad could it be? All of these are basically from the 70s, from what I can tell. 70s or early 80s, so I just kept it. I might not keep it forever, who knows? I still have to spin it and play it. A Hall & Oates album called Pastimes Behind, which is a collection of songs, I think from like before their first album came out. So this must be like very early 70s. I didn't recognize any of these songs. But again, the record was in nice shape, even though the sleeve is kind of flimsy and kind of not so nice shape. But Bachelor's Paradise by Anne Margaret. This is another one. It's a mono copy. Mint condition record, and it's on the RCA Victor label, you know, with the dog sitting in front of the gramophone. Not the digital gramophone, but I still love you, John. Why did I keep this? I don't know. Just because the record was in good shape. I'll give it a spin. Maybe it'll stay in the collection, maybe not. But for now, I just pulled it to set it aside. Then another one that I kept for like one song is Ambrosia, Life Beyond LA. And the song that is on here, that was their hit, was How Much I Feel, which reminds me of the old 70s days of WFYR FM. Fire. I like the song, so I kept the album. That's kind of the story with a lot of these. Speaking of stories, I got the Four Seasons story. This is like a greatest hits comp, double album. As you can see, it has basically every single hit of the band up to, I think, the 70s. It doesn't have Oh What a Night on it, or what was that other song that was a hit of theirs in the mid 70s? But basically everything from the 60s is on here. So I kept it. It's nice. This guy loved America. Like I said before, this is America's Greatest Hits. I may just keep this one and get rid of the others that I've got, because basically all you need are the greatest hits when it comes to America. Jose Feliciano, live in concert at the London Palladium. The album's name is called Alive, Alive, Oh. This is a double album. Heavy ringwear on the cover, as you can see. Orange RCA label. This came out, I think, in 1970, I want to say. It's a double album. The records themselves are, maybe VG kind of beat, but I'm hoping they play well. This also has, I showed on social media a while ago, I had this greatest hits, which is sitting off to the side, called Encore. And that contained the cover version of his, of the California Dreamin' that he did, which I think came from this album. So I'll be kind of interested to listen to this. I like Jose Feliciano. He's more than just Feliz Navidad. At least a little bit more. KC and the Sunshine Band, come on. How can you not take this album if it's for free? That's the Way, I like it, is on here, among others, as you can see. Again, a decent condition record. I figured, why not? For free, I'll take it. Little River Band, Greatest Hits. If you like your Little River Band, which I kind of do. Here are their songs. And again, very nice condition record. Very nice hype sticker, which is why I left the shrink on here. And last but not least, OJ's Family Reunion. I always dig the OJ's. And this one has I Love Music on it, which I think was their hit. They cover, what do they cover on here? Never mind. I'm looking at song titles, but I thought they did some other covers on here. Philadelphia International Records. Very cool. Gotta love the OJ's. So, between all this and all the stuff I showed you earlier from VCLT, I've got a shit ton of music to play and listen to. And just this morning, I finally played a record. Cora was up here and she wanted to hear something, which was a good sign, because she hasn't really wanted to do anything except sleep. And I played Strong Persuader by Robert Cray, which I showed earlier. Great, great album. So I just wanted to show all these off to you. Tell me what you think. Tell me about if I made some good picks, or if I should get rid of some. You never know. Some will stick, some probably won't, but the condition was what I was basically looking at when I kept them. So that's pretty much what I got for now. If you made it to the end, I love you. We're at 24 minutes, just over 24 minutes, so I'm going to cut it off here. This is your boy Jeff. Peace. Hope to be back sooner than later. Until then, though, have a great weekend. Go Bears. I don't have any confidence in them anymore, but go Bears. And I'll see you guys again soon. So take care.